Hello, friends, and welcome to UA Legends, the podcast where each episode shines a spotlight on a hidden gem of the user acquisition world. I'll be your host, Adam, and together with my guests, we're going to deep dive into the wonderful world of user acquisition. We're going to tackle pressing industry topics and discuss the secrets behind my guests' successes. Please don't forget to follow us on AppsFlyer's YouTube channel, Spotify, Apple, or Amazon podcast channels. Okay, that's enough from me. Let's get on with it. Gus, thank you so much for joining me today.
Absolute pleasure being here, man.
It's nice. It's nice. We got this UA Legends going. And you of course are a huge UA legend that we meet in pretty much every conference everywhere.
I was about to say, it's like we never plan on meeting on any conference.
No.
We end up
in fact, when we do plan on meeting, it never works out.
Yeah. No, it's. I feel like at this point we all live at the conferences, and we happen to have a life in between.
I picture it as like a traveling circus. But anyway, tell me about yourself. Like, let's go for sort of full-on interview situation here, because I think it will be fun. Tell me about yourself. Like, what's your work history? What's your route to where you are now? Like, what do you find interesting? Yeah. Did you always want to do user acquisition? I have this thing where there's certain people who, from childhood, obviously wanted to be in user acquisition.
I can't even imagine that. No. Oh God, my path was really not an obvious one, but there's something that's constant. There is something that's constant. I think so. As a kid, I used to draw a lot and also do math puzzles a lot. So I really liked both the math side and the artistic side, and I always had that. So as a kid, I was like, yeah, and this is why I'm going to be a crazy scientist when I was a kid.
And when that didn't work out.
No. I do cocktails now. And I think the same way. It's like, mixing some things up. But no, when I was in high school and, guidance counselors go over, what kind of thing do you like or not like? And when they were seeing what intersects between art and math, because I was like in math Olympiads on one side and doing and drawing comic books on the other. So it's very specific, like two very strong forces at the same time. And the conclusion at the time was architecture. I'm actually, my degree is in architecture. I'm an architect.
Okay.
So from there to UA, there's a few steps. At the time, it made sense. It's like, hey, you have the civil engineers on the one side, you have the artists on the other. And for me, it was like being in the middle, like coordinating.
Yeah, sort of bringing it all together,
Yeah, the engineers and the artists, which you're already kind of seeing where the through line goes, because game making is all about
mobile game dev.
Exactly. It's all about engineers and designers and artists.
But also getting that to speak a common language. Like that's the
being the bridge. Yeah. If there's one thing I think I've specialized in my UA career was always trying to connect the different departments together. It's something that I'm very passionate about. And for instance, when I was at Rovio, I think that was like number one concern was, hey, we're not talking enough to the artists that make the creatives. We're not talking enough to the engineers behind the games. And I want to know more about the code that goes into the attribution that goes into the monetization, and there's a lot of, but I'm getting sidetracked to the future, back to the past. I was doing architecture, and ironically, everyone was saying, "Oh, your buildings, they look very funky. They look like they belong in video games." And I was always a heavy gamer from the start, and so it was funny. I kind of went and thought to myself, wait, what if I worked in games? Like, what if, right? And as an architect, like, I was thinking, what's the most similar? And to me, it was game designer. So I actually spent, I think it was a year on the side making board games, prototypes, like experiments and ideas. And at some point, I had some games that my friends just came over specifically to play the games I had made. And I was like, wait, maybe I'm onto something. Maybe I'm actually decent
Again,
at
that's
this.
I mean the maths side of it is absolutely perfect for tabletop games. I mean, like that's fits
It's like whip
amazingly.
out a spreadsheet, make some
Like
math until it.
D and D.
Yeah, exactly. so so I kind of combined like my limited artistic skills with my thankfully not so limited spreadsheet skills, which still to this day are a blessing. And made some games for my friends. They loved it, and I was like, okay, let me go to publishers. Let me go to actually real life game designers that are professionals at this. And I literally ram through the door with a board game prototype, like slam it on the table and say, play with me. And if you like it, you're gonna hire me. I don't care if you pay me. I just want you to hire me because I want the experience.
Amazing.
I was like early 20s or something. So at that
Yeah,
point,
yeah,
like, who cares? Like, it's also, this is in Portugal, by the way. So, like, on the back of the financial crisis. So, money wasn't easy anyway. So, I was like,
yeah.
might as well just follow my dreams. Um, so, I got hired. So, it actually worked. I think the part of paying little really helped. And
and going with an already prepared board game that you've made yourself. Yeah.
yeah, I got to experience what it's like to publish a board game, which was interesting. And it
Oh, so
in
you went into like it was board games to begin with.
yeah, it was actually board games.
Oh, amazing.
And the games industry back in the day wasn't so developed in Portugal. There was like Miniclip,
Mm,
and that's like the end of it. It's like there's Miniclip,
yeah.
and so when people were searching for game designers for different roles for startups, for instance, there wasn't much choice. So when they heard there's this nerdy dude in a basement like churning out board games, this huge nerd, there was a mobile app developer that wanted to make like a gamified music game, and was like, "Oh, I heard of this guy. Let me see if he's interested in the job." And I was like, "Oh yeah, of course I am. Let me try," because another through line of my experience has always been I love learning. I love new shit. I anything that's different, that's new, I'm gonna chase it. It's just
That's
my
what makes
nature.
life interesting, isn't it?
Yeah. I really feel like if I'm the dog, the bone is anything I don't know about, and I just
Yeah.
want to chase it down. So one thing led to another, and I was a game designer for a mobile game already. So that's how we get to the mobile games industry. Was actually again just like connections, human connections, and then I was responsible for the retention. So I was literally like the retention officer of the game, and I was focusing on D30 retention, stuff like this. But then I was very curious about the impact of the UA campaigns, and I was kept on pestering like the UA managers, like, "Hey, what are you doing over there? Like, why is that impacting my numbers so much? Like, what's going on?" And one thing led to another, and I kept on asking questions, and I kept on learning more about what they were doing. And at some point, they just for shits and giggles was like, "Hey, I'll let you manage some Facebook campaigns here and figure some things out."
They just
And
gave up and
again,
let
one
you do
thing,
it.
yeah, at some point,
I
right?
can't take it anymore. Just do it.
I mean, if you think
We've all
about it,
been there.
live ops of a game, it's all about like sustaining the game with UA campaigns, with events, with little tweaks to the game design of the game. And so it was kind of natural once you're in a more live opsy situation, like 1-2 years into the game's life cycle, that whomever's in charge of the retention is really concerned about the comings and goings of UA.
Yeah,
And
has to be.
so for me, it was kind of natural, the transition of, hey, let me just also hold some of these campaigns for myself because I'm curious about this. And one thing led to another. I'm going to skip forward a bit, and I end up in Finland, like a couple of years later, end up in Finland. I actually went to Finland with not much of a plan. I was just like, hey, there's a lot of game studios here. I'm sure I'll be fine. I'm sure there's a job for me somehow.
Yeah,
Zero planning there.
and it worked
Uh,
out.
it worked out so well. It took me 2 weeks. I went around and did the exact same approach, which is knocking on doors and people getting really mad at me because it's like, why didn't you just email? What are you doing, you caveman? Like knocking on
It's
a
harder
door.
to turn you away if you turn up in person, isn't it? Like it's easy
Exactly.
to throw an email away.
I was just telling him, hey, worst case scenario, I'm making a friend. Hello, you're my new friend. I'm very happy to meet you. I don't know anyone in this city, so it's a good thing. So
You're
the
lucky
thing
because it's an
is,
amazing city. I mean, out of choosing places to go, I think
yeah,
Helsinki is one of the best places you could have possibly chosen.
yeah,
It's
no,
a
it was on
fantastic
purpose.
community.
It was on purpose. I was looking at Rovia and Supercell, and I was like so excited.
Yeah, yeah.
There's so many possibilities here. And I happen to not mind the cold. I happen to not mind the dark. As
Well,
a nerd, those are
that's a
excuses to
bonus.
go video game. So the thing is, when I transitioned to a new country, it's a great excuse to reinvent yourself, right?
Yeah, for
And I
sure.
had been doing game design for a bit, but I had also been doing UA campaigns for a bit, and I was thinking to myself, what do I do with myself? Because if I say I'm half UA, half game design, people are just going to think that's weird.
Yeah,
I don't.
because but at that time also marketing wasn't particularly connected to product either. It
No.
was you'd go through, you'd build the product, and then it would be handed over to marketing, going go market it. It's
Yeah,
very different.
basically. Very much so. I had no. I'll be honest. Like it's funny how little I knew about product, despite being theoretically a game designer. Didn't know how the code work, how the art pipelines work. I didn't know as much as I know today about product at the
Mm,
time, which is funny. But UA was this uncharted territory. This is
yeah.
10-ish. I don't know, years ago. It
So
was
when
a while
it
ago.
was just starting, really,
Yeah,
it just
yeah.
kind of
I don't think there were value campaigns maybe yet.
no,
So
no.
something like that.
When
So
back
at
when
the
it was really hard to find user acquisition people who sort of had experience in Europe, even like
yeah,
it was always like San Francisco is where anybody with experience was.
yeah, and this was also pre GDPR. So this
Yeah,
was campaigns. UA and campaigns were kind of, you're making a lookalike campaign about people who just moved, have this specific income level, that have these interests in these specific games
yeah, yeah,
and series on TV. And so it was very different, like super different from what it is nowadays.
yeah.
And it was super interesting. I mean, it's
Yeah, yeah. I
still
mean,
kind of a
oh, come
game.
on, back at that point, and I started Facebook Canvas, and back in those days, it was Wild West. I mean, you had access to an awful lot of data and everything that you don't have access to now. So there was an awful lot of different things that you could do to try and either for retention or for user acquisition in the first place. It was really quite incredible.
It was. It got. I remember my. So the MMP connection was perfect. Well, perfect, allegedly, right? Perfect. And there was no GDPR. There was no IDFA deprecation on the Apple side. There was none of this.
Yeah,
So data was quote unquote perfect, and Facebook was collecting everything because this is before all the scandals,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
So you could literally get psychological profiles and then store them within the game and then match them to events within the game
yeah,
and go
yeah, yeah.
really deep, really
And I
deep.
remember Facebook was the only SRN, if I remember rightly, at the time, who forced everybody to send everything to them if you wanted to work with them.
Yeah. No,
Yeah,
and the market was less fragmented. It
yeah.
was
Oh, of course.
Facebook. Facebook was, for some people, could be the only network, and that would
Mhm.
be relatively okay. Although I would say Facebook, Google, but at least Facebook, Google, and anything beyond that point was, hey, you're trying a bit too hard.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
um, not saying that it wasn't necessary, and that's a lesson I learned later in my career. But as a junior, and it's like, hey, I'm seeing Facebook and it has all this data, and you could lose yourself for days, weeks, months just
oh yeah,
exploring the multitude of data. So stuff was super interesting. Um, so that's actually, I would say, the first job that I had that was more on the marketing side. It was still a growth hacker, which was a very popular term at the time. There's still growth hackers to this day, but growth hacker at the time meant you're going to achieve growth to the product by any means necessary. And any means necessary means if it's a bit of game design here, if it's UA, if it's traditional marketing, if it's something else, that's fine. Go for it. Email marketing, stuff like this.
And it sat on the marketing side, or it sat on the
marketing
product side?
Marketing. And so that was actually my first job there. And I actually solidified my decision 3 years later when we got acquired by Supercell, and I actually got to work there and see these titans of industry, these geniuses, and because this is back before Brawl Stars even, and see how amazing like a proper game designer at the end of their career, like at the apex of their career, looked like, and also got to see what the top of the charts look like from the inside. And out of that, it's weirdly easy. Sometimes when you find your calling, it's weirdly easy to make a decision. I looked at what one thing looks like, what the other thing looks like, and I was like, no, UA is for me. UA is the thing that resonates with me the hardest. I always loved spreadsheets. I've always loved data, and it made a lot of sense, like a lot of sense.
Please say you've moved on to SQL now, though, or is it still spreadsheets?
Well,
it's still spreadsheets, isn't it? It's
sometimes. Oh man, I all kinds of stuff. Like, I'm not even going to get into it, but I will say that I managed to retain all of the things that I loved from the start, which is I still work with artists, nowadays marketing artists.
Yeah.
I still work with engineers. To this day, I might be the one that's configuring an event, how it's collected, specifically what line of code triggers the analytics events, because I am that curious about the little nitty gritty. I still feel that UA is kind of a game for me, is min-maxing every little detail, optimizing every little thing. And to truly master, you have to be the Reddit
I think it's
guy.
Great to have that level of knowledge depth, to whenever you want to understand something. I mean, I'm very similar in that you have to dig into a granular level to actually like understand how it works, almost reverse engineer it in order to understand how it works, to then be able to say like, I fully get it and this is what's happening.
Very much so. I feel like one exercise that everyone should do is try to figure out how they learn. Like, what's the mental process? How does it work? And when I did that exercise with myself, I learned that it's all about examples for me. So that reverse engineering that you're talking about is exactly how I learn. So if you couple curiosity with, I want to see what you're doing, I'm curious about what you are doing, exactly how you're doing, and then extrapolate why things are the way they are. If I just expose myself to more and more stuff, eventually things coalesce better. And it materialized in a career.
I think a lot of people in gaming are the same. Like, I think it's almost like a personality trait of the gaming industry, which isn't a bad thing. I mean, it makes things think in a different way and come up with different. I mean, you look at the innovation that's come from the gaming world, and it stands to reason that people don't accept how things are and will work around different things.
I mean, it's a final boss. You're trying to study their movement pattern. You're trying to study how to break that movement pattern and defeat the final boss, right? That's a game.
Such a good analogy.
Yeah. You're reverse engineering what you're supposed to do. That's a gamer. You're absolutely right. It's a gamer trait. Yeah.
It is.
Yeah. But yeah, like the rest is history. You also asked another question, which was what drives me, what excites me about UA. And this current job I have is very much the answer to that. But I've been in a few startups. I've been at Rovio. I've been so I've seen how it is at the top. I've seen how it is at the start, and I've seen a lot in between. And I feel that I just want to learn more. I just want to check out what are the different aspects of our game industry. I think that it's such a complex machine that everything is kind of interesting. Like lately, as you might have heard, I've been very deep into AI. I've been very deep into figuring out how does it increase our productivity? How does it increase our output? How can we use AI to be highly customizable when it comes to the UA approach, when it
Yeah.
comes to the game approach? And the
I mean,
answer
that's
to
something I'd like to dive into in just a minute, to be honest.
for sure, but why this job, at least for me on a personal level, it's something new. So had I done anything with AI before? No. Do I want to learn? Yes. So it's simple. It's the same thing that got me from
But it's also
yeah,
has anybody done anything with it before? You know, in terms of
yeah,
being able, it's like you're exploring a whole new area, which is very fun on its own.
yeah.
There's no
And
white papers, there's no best practices.
yeah, and it's a bit inevitable, right? Because anyone who does a craft for 7 years or more, they're masters of the craft.
Yeah.
So once you master, this is a good question for seniors out there. Um, once you master something, what do you do next? Because it's going to be boring. It's if you just do the same thing, it's going to be boring. So I rather take a job that is in something either completely new or groundbreaking or avant-garde, like something that doesn't exist yet, any day, because it will keep things fresh, and I keep on mastering new things.
But I think you've also got to be. So I think some people get very comfortable where they are, and like especially if they become sort of senior in terms of knowledge and everything else, become very comfortable in what they're doing. And obviously, going into something very new, you have to be able to accept the fact that you may fail at it. Like it's that's very real, very real outcome when you're doing something that's so new.
Yeah, I have some trainees right now, and I've been teaching them UA. I've been teaching them, the basics of things. And then we got to the topic of AI because we're automating some things, and we're like you said, we're doing something people haven't done before, right? And as a trainee, you're looking for guidance to your mentor as like, hey, what do I do now? And I
Is
go,
this right? Yeah.
I have no idea. And you have to be okay with that. You have
Yeah, for sure.
I think the best companies, the best people within companies kind of have one thing in common. The Finns would call it humility, that they're very well known for, like the humbleness of the Finn. But I also call it a bit of ego death. Is you don't matter. It's the customer, the user. It's the technology. It's the thing that you're pouring yourself into. That's what
Yeah.
matters. It
Yeah, for
doesn't matter
sure.
if you don't know anything. It matters that the thing still exists, whether you know it, you don't, whether you feel good about it, or whether you don't. And the more I get to things that actually matter, that actually move the needle in terms of numbers, it's always the moment that I go, okay, forget everything I know. What is this?
Mm.
And especially creatives, you never know what's the creative that's going to win. You never know. You might have some inklings. I've seen in the past that creative XYZ works, so this should work. You have an
Yeah.
instinct, but you never truly know. It's really hard to pinpoint it. So you have to forego your ego, forego your past knowledge, and just go for it. Really.
I always found on the social casino side, because it wasn't, I wasn't the target demographic for a start, but anything I liked always failed. Like it was like we built a whole new game. I absolutely loved the game, and of course it fails, and it's anyway.
It's very no. That's super true. That's super true. You have a lot of people in mobile casual that are making games primarily for women in particular age groups, let's say 50s, and we're not a woman in our 50s in the States.
Mm.
So what would
But you
we know?
still have to come up with creative that resonates with women in their 50s in the States.
Exactly. Like which we could then go to a DUI topic of, hey, we should hire more women, blah blah blah. And actually, it's something I'm passionate about too. That I really do feel like we need more of the example of the target, because they probably
100%,
have a better
100%.
instinct.
But I think that's true, and that's something that in, let's say, corporate gaming, doesn't happen as much as I would like to see is them hiring people who are fully passionate about the game. Like you kind of get people, and I've seen it a few times where you sort of nobody plays it.
Mm-hmm.
It's very
Mm-hmm.
hard to keep something going like that if none of the team even plays the game. It's very
Mm-hmm.
difficult. It's very difficult to
We
keep the.
I agree with you, and I think because of that, we actually here at Cosmic Launch have a rule that we only hire gamers. Like we kind of have to, and then that might be why I got back into Magic the Gathering. And just last night, just last night, we stayed at the office maybe a bit too late, playing some cards. But yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. You can't innovate, you can't get to groundbreaking stuff if you're not passionate about it. I mean,
100%.
theoretically you can, but yeah.
I mean, in theory, yes, because if you look at all of the numbers, if you look at the analytics, you could do it the cold. Potentially, you can do it that cold way, but I still think you need an element of passion if you're going to create something that isn't a copy of something that's already been made. If you're doing something completely new, I really feel that you need that. It has to be a passion project.
Yeah, for sure. And again, like most A/B tests, so it's funny. So we here, for instance, only hire people that have been at least 10 years in the industry and so forth. Almost all of our A/B tests, we call the results before we start the test, which, to be frank, kind of means we didn't need it. But again, humility, let's not. But you get a sense for it if you really truly care about the game, you really truly care about
No, you
the
do. You do.
creatives and stuff. Yeah, you're gonna kind of know after a bit. Yeah, look, here's a different way of talking about this. For me, the best people at coming up with creatives are usually the game designer of the game.
Yeah.
Usually, and that's because they get the game at such a deep level. They understand why the game is the way it is. Because I mean,
and
they were the
players'
ones who came up with that.
motivations for playing the game. It's that to understand why somebody plays and the elements that they like of the game, and you're showing those elements up front, and it resonates with people that would like that. I do feel that's super important.
Yeah, and so anytime anyone goes, "Oh, do you have any advice about creatives or setting up or testing, whatever?" It's like, hire a game designer. I know it sounds weird, but like, just ask them. If you play the game 500 times, you're gonna know why the game is good or why the game is bad, and what should you talk about, what you shouldn't talk about. Because it's not trivial, it's not easy. Like, it's just an art form.
Do you think that's what's made you successful within user acquisition, is actually having experience of the whole board games that you were building and that kind of thing? Do you think that there's an element that's been pulled over to the user acquisition side?
For creatives, yes. For creatives, I feel that, and I wasn't making the association. Thank you for making the association for me. That I haven't actually.
Well, you're a UA legend. I mean, come on.
No, the game design aspect. So look, there's something I keep on thinking when I'm making a creative, which is poster design mentality, which is, if you look at a frame of a creative, what do you glean from it? What's the understanding? What's the concept? And you have to min-max that understanding. It's like in a split second. I remember one time a Facebook account manager came up to me and said, "Did you know, according to our studies, that it takes 0.003 of a second, 300 milliseconds, for a person to capture the concept of an image when they see it. So that fraction of a second that starts a video off is really key. So that first freeze frame, I'm always going over it and going, okay, what are we saying? What is the one thing that pops in this image? And then using a bit of color theory too is like, what's the predominant color in this first frame, and how does that matter? These are all concepts that I learned from not even game design, architecture, actually.
Amazing.
And they just transposed over time to creatives. And then Actually,
Maybe
yeah.
maybe that is the university course for getting into user acquisition.
Funny enough, I'm not the only one. Let's say that again, it's the second time I'm mentioning it today, but the housing crisis made some architects make some tough decisions into other careers.
I'm sure it made, yeah.
Um, I'm really happy that the game industry is so accepting of people that don't necessarily study specifically for a specific craft within it. And I think again, it's because, and this happens the more and more I age, I figure out that you should hire for personality and aptitude and learning potential, less so than previous experience,
Yeah.
especially when the tech changes so fast and the concepts change so fast
Yeah.
that it doesn't really matter what you know before. It matters how fast you're going to learn what's about to come next. At
And
least
the majority of knowledge skills are transferable. It's the personal traits and the way you approach different problems and that kind of thing that is the part that isn't transferable. You know, you either have that or you don't. And I completely agree with you on that respect.
Yeah. And what is marketing? What is like UA? It's, if you think about it, it's like 100 tiny common sense things. It's like, why do we target the way we do? Why do we design the creatives the way we do? Why do they all have an end card at the end most of the time? And all of these little things are effectively like one sentence bits of knowledge.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
to be really good at this, you might have to hold in your head 100 of them simultaneously, because oops, I forgot that if I'm going to say a very dumb one. I forgot that by not showing gameplay footage because I went all out on a narrative creative, the retention went down because we're not showing that it's a game.
Yeah, it's true.
But it happens sometimes. You get carried away.
Sure.
It's like, I should make a cinematic trailer to talk about this game, and you get carried away, and then you might forget about a basic piece of common sense that saves you. So yeah, it's being being a perfectionist, a bit memorizing all of these little things, a bit being curious. Like there's a lot of things that go into being good at UA, I would say.
So what's I mean, you've been doing a lot with AI, as you mentioned a bit earlier. What's one of the biggest things regarding creative that you've done with AI?
So this is interesting because the thing that I've learned about not just LLMs, but generative AI and then even a bit of machine learning is that because AI is segmented into these different models, these different these different technologies. What I've learned is that it's kind of a Swiss Army knife. It's possible for a lot of things. It started with something simple, which is, hey, you have add A, and you need to do variations of add A by swapping the character, swapping the background, swapping the language, translating everything, getting ideas for the cultural implications of the different localizations. And then, hey, actually, since we're on the topic of swapping, what if maybe cheekily we see what the competition is doing and we hot swap that same content and concept into our assets, our theme, our context that is different, but you can get some things from there. And so it started off by focusing more on the variations of creatives, the little tweaks and knobs. Think Voodoo ads, for instance. Like Voodoo back in the day, because I had also the pleasure of working with them at some point back in the day with hyper casual games, that they were all about this. Let's now apply a filter to the video. Let's swap the color. Let's change how the caption looks. And these are things that AI is very good at. If it's just editing, with something quick, that's
specific
super easy.
Things. Yeah.
But then I started to get a bit more ambitious. It's like, hey, what if I had this whole folder of assets sitting over here, and I gave the AI, hey, mishmash them together in various different ways, just random combinations. And I want to see what you come up with, you AI, and see if anything makes sense for us humans, and then maybe we'll test the better ones. One thing that it for sure still applies to AI, and I've been saying this from the start, is it's not perfect at all yet. It's very still buggy, and it always needs a hint of human touch on top.
Yeah.
But it's just a hint of human touch. It still saves you a lot of time, and you can be. I'm not gonna say specific numbers because I remember one talk. I think you were there back in a UA society. I think that someone quoted a number as like 4,000 times more creatives, uh, and I was like, I can see how that's possible, but there's still a human being pressing buttons on the
You've
other
still got to
side.
do something, yeah.
Yeah, calm down. So, but a 20x on your productivity, I can totally imagine that being absolutely possible. I haven't personally measured how much it increased the amount of creatives I do because, to be fair, uh, doing something new for the first time, I rather just do first and then take the conclusions as I go along,
Yeah.
rather than
Yeah.
waste time measuring each and everything I did. Um, an old CEO of mine back in the day, I think it was that job that I was a game designer for a mobile app at the first time. He always taught me you first open up the whole of possibilities that you can learn from something, like broaden your horizon before you contract, and those learnings, those writing down what did I learn always happens at the end and not at the start, or else you run the risk of not seeing,
Yeah.
not capturing something along the way.
Not seeing the bigger picture of things. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's super
In
interesting.
yeah, I started with something very trivial, which is going to, like, I think it was Canva, and giving it my assets and going like, hey, what can you do with this? How would you sell um, a mobile puzzle game, which is what we're doing right now? And it actually came up with a creative that wasn't maybe the best one, but it also wasn't the worst one. So I was like, hey, I already got like a junior creative director here.
But it's giving you ideas. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, hey, this is actually something very, very. People have always said, "Oh, AI is going to take jobs and so forth." Well, in a way, it is kind of raising the floor, the bottom.
yeah.
It's, you now have to be better than a high schooler at your job or something like this,
Yeah. Yeah.
and this means that you can't just, in my opinion, you can't just half-ass things. You really have to, and if you want to, you can ask the AI, and then you will also be at the level of like the junior or a trainee at every job.
Yeah.
Cool. This is how I think this year I learned how to 3D sculpt, and I've never done it before. And what I did was sent screenshots of Blender, which I opened up to learn this, and ask, okay, what button do I press? When do I press it? Why do I press it? And the AI kept on teaching me
Amazing.
until I was bad, but more than zero.
Yeah. That's
So,
impressive. That's impressive.
yeah. And it continues that. And at this point, I think the thing that we're doing this week is automating our social media content, something like this. And it's really interesting to see how fast we can get to a baseline with AI. And yeah, I think, don't be scared of AI, but please embrace it, because it's the equivalent of, again, to use architecture here. Back in the day, people were saying, if you don't draw a building with pencil and paper, it's not a true line, a true drawing. And I was like, dude, we have CAD software over there, and we can just like 2 clicks and the line is done. It communicates the exact same amount of information.
Yeah.
And maybe my teacher back in the day would go, no, the expression of the line is so important. It's like, dude, it's a line. Calm down. So
That's it.
yeah.
That's the analytical versus the artistic.
Yeah, pretty much. It's AI is the new calculator that if you don't use it to do quick math, you still can do it. Great, good
Yeah.
on you, but it's faster, so just use it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
Right. I've got a couple of other questions that I want to throw at you very quickly.
Go for it.
What do you wish you'd known earlier in your career that you now have the knowledge of?
Damn, that's a good question.
What would have helped you earlier on?
I think back in the day, I'm not sure nowadays is as much as it used to be, but everything is negotiable. Everything is we're all the same children lost in the dark, and this applies to the ad networks. This applies to the coders behind our games and all of these different things. Everything has been done by someone who at some point didn't know what they were doing,
Yeah.
and they maybe like a monkey learned from seeing, just like myself have learned from seeing. And what that means is that sometimes things don't make sense, things don't add up, and you can kind of negotiate your way through it into a better outcome. That might be hey, maybe this algorithm is not as good as it's been sold, and maybe you need to pass data in a different way to achieve the result that was intended. And so it's actually, this is one of the reasons why I always check how the analytics events are implemented in a game, because maybe the coder wasn't thinking about the business case when they were implementing it. And for them, it made sense from their coding standpoint about code cleanliness. But actually having a UA manager present with the product and saying, hey, this is why we're doing this, and it's important that you put it just in this specific moment in this specific way, makes a huge amount of difference.
But it's
And it
almost
goes back.
it's almost sort of showing the entire journey, though. It's it's like making people understand the entire journey.
Yeah, and that's why I sit in product meetings, and I think that something actually quite unique about here at Cosmic Lounge, that we really try to connect all the different dots from all the different departments. Sure, it might make us take a bit longer, but then we might get to the better result ultimately.
Yeah.
And then it's more sustainable and long term. It's a bit of an upfront investment, but especially for someone like myself that I code on the side for fun, weirdly, and have done the game design and do all sorts of different marketing aspects and monetization aspects. For me, I see it maybe more than most that it is important for us to talk together and like align on these minor details, because that's the difference between that 1%, 2% little optimization that you're missing, and what is UA if it isn't multiplying things just a tad bit better than just pressing a button and letting the campaign go.
For sure.
That's the craft.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay, and we've got. I'm going to end with this one. We've got a lot of people who are potentially newer to user acquisition listening to this as well.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of that, how did you learn a lot of this stuff? You know, there isn't a university course for it. There isn't somewhere that you can go to learn everything about user acquisition for a game or app. How did you discover some of this information?
Damn, because it was back in the day.
Or even how would you go about it now? Like, I mean,
so I would say that I'm actually gonna pivot slightly to one topic, which was at the beginning I had to be self-taught at the beginning. My predecessors, like my CMOs back in the day, they were from traditional either media buying or even traditional marketing, or maybe PC console, in which it was more about the trailers and more about the PR statements and so forth.
Yeah.
And so the people that were training me didn't know about this section, so I had to kind of get through it, which created a lot of self-doubt. And honestly, like a new UA manager is going to have a lot of self-doubt, any field at the beginning. And I loved going to Rovio, which is a place that is like a bastion of like knowledge that has been kept for over a decade at this point, 16 plus years. Don't remember exactly, but they've kept that knowledge all throughout possibly over 100 UA managers over the years that have passed through those doors, and they stored everything, right? And so it was so educational, like going in and kind of going against what did I learn by myself versus what is the established knowledge. And I figured out that it was good to not doubt myself that hard, because there were actually some things that I discovered just by being curious that in some instances were slightly better. Of course, I learned way, way, way more and faster. And then maybe that's the advice, is maybe start off with a bigger company where you have a bigger team and you already establish your basis a bit with more people at the same time. So you also remove a bit of your own personal bias. And in a startup, you're going to have to be self-taught. And maybe I wouldn't start there. I would transition. I would recommend anyone to pass by a startup because it's fun. But
Immense
yeah,
fun.
maybe not where you start. Yeah.
Very cool. Well, you are an absolute UA legend, Gus, and thank you so much for joining me. It's been an absolute honor talking to you today.
Likewise.
And I'm
Always.
sure we're going to see each other soon at multiple different
I
conferences.
think it's literally like 2 weeks from now. It always is. Absolute pleasure, man.
You could say that at any point. It's 2 weeks from now.
It actually probably. Oh God. Oh yeah, and one last message maybe for everyone, which is that's how I learn nowadays, is all these conferences. There's a point to why we go to this. Is the podcast like this one? It's conferences like the one we're inevitably going to meet in 2 weeks, and like stay curious. Like listen, there are resources out there, a lot of them, and it can be overwhelming even, but it's so much fun. Like there's very fun people in our industry too. Let's not forget, it's way more interesting than a lot of them.
It really is. It really is. Thank you so much.
Cheers.